Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 98 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday evening. Not our usual time slot, I will say, but I'm joined on tonight's podcast by Scott Coleman. And Scott, we have some relatively unexpected news to touch on this Thursday.
Hey, Brad. Hope you are doing well. Happy off season to you and everybody else out there. We were going to do this show regardless, but it was going to be some mailbag and maybe a couple of other items just to, give the people 30, 45 minutes of some Braves talk. And lo and behold, the Braves made for an organization that prides itself on status quo and consistency and year-over-year continuity, they made a pretty significant change to the coaching staff here on Thursday afternoon. And obviously, we have plenty to talk about tonight.
That's right. And it's a good way to kind of tee that up. If you were just joining us, first of all, welcome to the podcast. It's kind of an odd time to join us, but hey, welcome aboard. We definitely encourage you to do that. We will be here all off season long. Some podcasts might go dark between October and March. We don't do that. We're going to be here all year long, and we're a part of Foul Territory as well. Please subscribe, rate, review the podcast. Check us out on Apple. Check us out on Spotify. We're on YouTube if you want to see our shining faces, and please like the episode there as well. But as Scott alludes to, a pretty significant coaching staff overhaul, we'll say. 3 guys out the door unexpectedly on a Thursday. As of right now, this has not been announced by the team, but when every single beat writer has it, it's been confirmed. There's been an interview given by one of the ousted coaches. Like, this is happening. It's done. The Braves are moving on from the headliner is definitely hitting coach Kevin Seitzer. Also, the number 2 hitting coach, Bobby, are we going with Magallanes? Is that what we're going with? We're taking a guess there. I have never said that man's name out loud. My apologies if that's wrong. And then also catching coach Fasano are all not being retained. There is some tiptoeing around in some of the reporting. I know David O'Brien said fired. Look, when you have this is my framing now, my cold dead heart, Scott. If you have time on your contract and they're not bringing you back, you were fired. Yeah. This is a firing. It seems like by all accounts, like it might be something of a not as negative firing as some might be. Kevin Seitzer was pretty upbeat and pretty kind to Alex and the staff on the interview that he gave to The Athletic. But look, this is a firing, and kind of the background here is you and I did a podcast only a few days ago, less than a week ago. Alex Ethopoulos and Brian Snicker said on the record, and I've heard the audio, that these guys, that no one on the staff was going to be lost. In fact, the direct quote from Alex was, quote, "Barring some retiring or resigning, the expectation is that they're all back as far as the coaching staff is concerned." And we kind of made fun of that, not necessarily on the show, but like we talked a lot on that reaction episode about how sometimes you can't say what you think if you're Alex and Brian. And I guess this is one of those times when like they said the opposite of this, and then only a few days later they end up cleaning house, basically.
Yeah, I can't remember, Brad, if we said it on the show or if it was just in our show notes, but I think it crossed our mind at least that just because Alex said that he anticipated having the staff back, of course, did not mean that it was set in stone. Frankly, it probably would have been a tad awkward to, in the middle of a media call, say, "Oh, by the way, we're firing our hitting coach of a decade and our assistant hitting coach of 4 years and our beloved catching coach and game coordinator of 6 years." That would have been a bit awkward. And it sounds like, when Alex and Snit did the interviews with media last week, it wasn't even 48 hours since the Braves had been eliminated. So there's a real chance that the team did not know for certain that it was going to make these moves. You and I think, felt in unison on Sunday night that if Seitzer returned, we were okay with it given the track record, but changes needed to be made in terms of approach and game plan. And now, this is a enormous change for the organization and the coaching staff as a whole. Again, a ton of continuity with this bench under Brian Snitker since he took over, 2016. Kevin Seitzer was there for all of that. He was hired.
And before that, he was there before Snitker was the manager. He was hitting coach under Freddie Gonzalez. It's been a long time. Yeah. In fact, I believe you pulled this, but Justin, I think it was Toscano, reported that he was the longest tenured hitting coach in all of baseball. So this is because of that in particular, that's a notable change. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, by the way, about the Alex and Snit thing. Like, the only way they could have said that on the Zoom call would have been if they kind of pre-announced it. Like, they were never going to break the news of someone being fired basically on a Zoom call. That wasn't going to the media. That wasn't going to happen. So anyway, that doesn't really matter now. It's just kind of interesting to talk about it and hear us what we said a week ago and all those things. But yeah, I mean, Seitzer, it's complicated, and we'll get into this even more as we get on here because it's probably going to be the main topic of the episode, maybe the only one. But we talked about it a little bit on Sunday too. There's been a lot of reaction in the fan base and around the fan base, even the beat guys, like before this, about like whether he should be. People that were mad at us for even floating it in the first place, like, oh, obviously you would keep Kevin Seitzer because of the track. And look, the record of success is there. He did preside over the best offense, maybe in league history, but certainly in Braves history, just a year and a half ago. Like, it wasn't that long ago with the same players. So if you want to frame it that way, you could say, you know, he was a steady hand. It worked out very well. Everybody seems to be simpatico there. Or you could say this year went so badly, and this is kind of where we thought it might go a few weeks ago. It went so badly that when you have an established manager and you have an established president of basketball operations, they're not going to go anywhere, and the players are all signed long-term. If you want to do something tangible to, like, you know, not announce something or, you know, signal something, the hitting coach is kind of in the crosshairs. And ultimately it feels to me like we're guessing. I will acknowledge that right now. We don't have inside info on any of the machinations behind the scenes right now. Maybe someone will report that out and share it. This is only a guess. I'm guessing that maybe that has something to do with it deep down. It's like, all right, or maybe it's philosophical. That's one of the things that we'll touch on here is like how much of a organizational shift actually is this, because there'll be some player changes too, but most of the guys in the lineup are going to be here again next year, and they kind of are what they are. So like, what does this actually say about what you want your team to be? And maybe also, how do you approach the process of filling these jobs? Because look, Scott, everyone in baseball is going to want this job. If you're a hitting coach, this is a prime opportunity with a team that just underperformed. So in theory, you have a lot of upside with when you arrive to, like, kind of leave your mark and get a lot of credit for it too if it goes well.
Yeah, you know, I think coaches probably both get too much credit and also too much blame all at the same time.
Yes.
You know, to use a football terminology, when the offense is terrible, you can't always fire the quarterback on a $200 million deal, but you can fire the offensive coordinator. Or when the defense has given up 40 points 3 weeks in a row, you can't fire your secondary, but you can fire the defensive coordinator. You know, truly, if you would have asked me a week ago at the end of the season if Kevin Seitzer would be back, I would sincerely say it was 50-50 in my mind. You mentioned the track record. You know, since Seitzer took over in 2015, so, you know, of course, the first couple of years of that, there was like negative talent in the lineup.
Yes.
But going back to 2018, at the start of the division run and now 7 years in the playoffs, this is how the Braves ranked as a lineup in WRC+. 15th, 10th, 3rd, 12th, 6th, 1st, and then 16th this past year. So even with everything that went wrong this past season, the Braves were decidedly average compared to the other 29 teams. And there were a lot of great moments in there too. Again, first last year, historic offense. They were 3rd in the 2020 shortened year. They were 6th in 2022. And again, top half of the league basically every year for 7 seasons in a row. So for the Braves to move on from a very accomplished and tenured hitting coach like this was maybe not a complete and total shock, but it was certainly a decision to be made. And I would be fascinated and thrilled to hear what kind of went on behind closed doors over the last 5 or 6 days since the season ended, because this was a big decision for the front office to make.
Absolutely. And we're going to dig in a little bit more to what it might signal, what it might foreshadow, whether it was justified, all those things, plus some of the more practical items about like who's been rumored already or maybe not rumored already. All that's coming in a second, but first, a word from our partners at Foul Territory.
This episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leader in men's lifestyle and grooming. If you're looking for that fresh barbershop shave at home, introducing Manscaped's newest innovation, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code FOUL20 for 20% off plus free shipping.
I've had so many bad razors in my past, and you only get one face. Make it count with the latest tech in face electric shavers. I'm talking Flex Adjust technology, which makes sure the blades and pivoting head adapt to the unique contours of your face and neck to hit all the angles.
There's a travel lock so you don't hear buzzing in your bag from an accidental on-button situation. And the Chairman Pro also features an LED spotlight to help you see every detail. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is smooth as a baby's butt. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code FOUL20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code FOUL20 at manscaped.com.
Okay, Scott, I kind of teased it earlier with the question, and it's actually, well, I'll hat tip it to our friend Stephen Tolbert, our colleague, about organizationally what this means. And presumably, Seitzer was kind of executing what the organization wanted. Like, if you're the hitting coach, you have a lot of autonomy, you would imagine, especially a veteran guy like Seitzer who's been around for a decade in this job. But he's not operating in a silo. Like, there's an organizational thing, especially the general consensus in the last decade, 2 decades, is that front offices have a lot more influence on day-to-day than they used to. They're in the mix with decision-making, lineup cards, shifts, all these things are like, it's not just the coaches anymore or the manager anymore. This stuff is all organizational. So Seitzer fits into that. And look, they got very unlucky. We touched on that. In fact, the most recent episode on this feed was with Steven and Sean, kind of chronicling what happened with the offense to some degree earlier this week. We all know it was a combination of many factors, between injuries in particular. There was some bad luck in there with the batted ball profiles, and then also just bad approach and underperformance, which that part of it goes under Seitzer to some degree. Again, players are also accountable. But what do you make of this organizationally? What does it say about the Braves? Is it simple as just putting a head on the stick and getting somebody fired and, clearing house? Or is it more like from Alex on down, we think we're going to actually have to change some stuff offensively because, again, the players are not going to largely change?
That is the $1 million question. And I mean, we're not going to know the answer to it for at least one season. And it's a great question. Is this a change and shift in organizational philosophy, or is it just going to be a different messenger working with the players after such a trying and challenging 2024 season? And I think we have talked plenty over the last few months about everything that went on with this lineup. And look, Kevin Seitzer is the coach. It is his job to put the players in the best situation possible and to set them up for success. But Kevin Seitzer also cannot lay off a slider 5 feet off the plate, Orlando Arcia, or swing at every pitch within a mile of the plate, Ozzy Albies, or whatever. So it is, I am fascinated to know who the Braves are going to hire for this job, and not only for the hitting coach, but for the hitting instructor and assistant hitting coach. They will have their pick of the litter, I would think. You talked about this as a franchise where people, players, coaches want to be. Of course, Brian Snitker has a long track record of people liking him. It's a winning organization. There is a ton of talent in this lineup that you can work with. So it's not as if the Braves are going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel the way other teams might have to. But until that person is hired, I am truly fascinated to see how it all shakes out. Because again, are the Braves going to suddenly try to change things in terms of philosophy, and for a team that has really preached slugging and power over the last couple of years, not only in philosophy, but also what players are added this offseason? Are the Braves under Alex Anthopoulos going to shift and try to be maybe more of a put a ball in play, get on base, run the bases a bit more team? Or do they just want a different voice in the room? And frankly, only about 3 people know the answer to that question. And sadly, we are not one of them. And hey, if Alex wants to come on the show anytime, we would happily do it.
Open invite to Alex to be sure to come on the podcast. But no, I think you're right. I think there's also kind of a middle path where, we touched on it a little bit on our most recent chat on Sunday, but like some of the clear issues, like they couldn't, as a lineup this year, seem to catch up to velocity in the zone. Like they were struggling with low fastballs in particular. The plate discipline, like the walk rate was not where you wanted to be as a team. Again, some of that's personnel. To your point, just to say it one more time, Ozzy Albies is not going to suddenly walk 15% of the time. It's not going to happen. But there are things in the margins you can kind of see that might be preached and driven home. And one of the challenges here is, like, I think managers are difficult to evaluate on the outside, and they're a lot easier than hitting coaches are to evaluate. Like, we see a lot more of what Brian Snicker is doing on a daily basis in the game than we do with a hitting coach. Like, it's very hard from the outside. I will raise my hand right now. Like, whoever they hire, we'll do our best to study what that person might be thinking. I'm sure they'll give an interview or two. But it's like, even in football, you used the football analogy earlier, I wish you could see, like, play designs and things of offensive coordinators. In baseball, you don't get that. Like, he's not running the offense in the way that an offensive coordinator is in football. Like, he's helping hitters, but it's an individual sport largely. Like, every single plate appearance is an individual thing. So it's really complicated and really nuanced. And I know this is not, this is better than social media for it, but nuance is not always received very well, alas. I'm intrigued by it. And again, the pool of hitting coaches that they get to, it won't be an application like you and I applying for a job, but they're going to be out the door wanting this job for obvious reasons. The talent level is super high, and that's a good place to be if you are Anthopoulos. On that note, by the way, Dave O'Brien already reported that Chipper is not going to be a candidate. If you were thinking Chipper was going to be a candidate, that was never going to happen by all accounts. Like, now, I do think that, and I'm like you do, I'm sure, every time we talk about this, someone in our mentions Chipper. And when I say mentions, I mean social media mentions. I get that. Chipper is a savant by all accounts. And if they want to try to entice Chipper to come to spring training and be a voice, I am all about that. That's fine. He's obviously preternaturally gifted in doing that. I think basically no one that pays attention closely was thinking he was going to take a full-time hitting coach job. The travel of that, it's a full-time job where you got to be with the team all the time. Chipper's made a lot of money. He doesn't need the money. Like, I don't think he wants to do that, just to say that.
Yeah. And, I think Chipper, on that podcast he did with, I'm blanking on Corey Kluber about a month ago. Yeah. Even Chipper said, talking about commitments to the game, and he has kids and, doing the dad thing. You only get one chance to watch your son grow up. Baseball will always be there. And hey, if Chipper wants to come around the team, I mean, seriously, green pass, let him come by whenever he wants. If there were 10 people on planet Earth who I would trust more to talk hitting approach and getting a player out of a slump or adjusting a mechanic, I would take Chipper over just about anybody else on planet Earth. But I don't think he's going to be the hitting coach for a couple of reasons. But hey, if you want to make him a special assistant to the GM or, special advisor to the GM, all for it.
And there are two jobs here, just for the record. I'm not sure we said that earlier. The catching job was kind of created for Sal Fasano. That's going away, but they're not going to replace him. By the way, another guy who is like very well liked, great reputation. So I'm not sure why they chose to do that, but that job is going away. Not just him. That they're just kind of closing that up. And most teams, from what I can gather today, just don't have that job. It's kind of an extra thing. And the Braves already have Eddie Perez, who was a longtime catcher. They had a catcher on their staff already, so that kind of seemed logical to me. But they are going to hire two hitting coaches. There's a lead guy, which was Seitzer, and then the number 2 assistant. So they have a little bit of room for diversity of thought. Maybe you don't have to necessarily hire two guys who have worked together before. It could be one from here, one from here. There will be a lead person, but we don't know who it's going to be. There's been no names that I've seen surface so far. And also, they're doing this kind of early. It struck me. It may not seem that way, but if you want to give the organization a little bit of a rosy outlook here, if you were going to make these moves, doing it on October 10th is actually the nicest thing you could do for Kevin Seitzer and these guys, because now they're ahead of the job market. Most teams have not done this yet. Now Kevin Seitzer has a decade-long resume. If he wants to keep doing this, I'm sure he'll get a job if he'd like a job somewhere in the league. He's very, very qualified and good at this. He also had his wife had a big time health thing this year, so hopefully. And by the way, in that interview he gave to DOB, she seems to be doing well, which is good. But it is kind of a little bit of an olive branch on the way out the door. It's still firing again. I don't want to overstate it, but doing it this early puts the Braves in a good position. They're acting first, and it also puts the guys who just got fired in a better spot than most guys are when they get fired.
Yeah, by all accounts, there's no bad blood here. I mean, Seitzer said all the right things. He had some really nice quotes in the piece with David O'Brien in The Athletic.
I'd read that for sure.
Yeah, we're checking out. And you mentioned his wife had a very serious medical thing. So, yes, I mean, anytime you get fired, it sucks. Doesn't matter what the situation is. Good terms, bad terms. It's unfortunate. But I would agree entirely. I think Seitzer can get a job. I think Magallanes could get a job. The one that was surprising, and not just to us, but I think both Justin and Mark Bowman pointed out that Sal Fasano was like beloved in that clubhouse. I don't think Travis Darno has spoken on it, but I would sure think that Travis and Sal have a really good relationship. Of course, he's worked with Murph the last couple of years, and the Braves have had fantastic catching for, basically this century, that really last 30 years at this point.
Truly.
And not that Fasano was around for all of that, but, I understood moving on from the two hitting coaches just because you do it, and there's really, I have a hard time seeing getting rid of the two hitting coaches completely backfiring on you. The offense may not go back to being like the number one offense with a new voice in the room. But I understood moving on from those two. Fasano, I don't know. I mean, it feels a little weird. That one, my hunch is that might be more of like a behind the scenes fit. Maybe they want to hire a different kind of coach to support the team instead of a catching coordinator, which is not a very common job in the majors. I don't know. That's just me guessing. But regardless, again, two very long tenured and one newer tenured assistants, and the Braves will definitively have a different look on the bench come next season.
Yeah, I agree with the Fasano thing. It is a little bit odd, but again, like most teams don't have that job. They do have Eddie Perez. Like it's like they're going to be lost in the wilderness at catcher because they don't have Sal Fasano as respected as he is, and he is very well respected in the game. Maybe we'll start to get some rumblings on who they're going to be interviewing. But to use the football analogy one more time, it's a lot lower profile process than like when a team in the NFL is hiring an offensive coordinator. Like hitting coaches are not like super well known, and when they are well known, it's because they're not because the team's underperforming. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where like you only know the coach's name if it's not going well, with very few exceptions.
100%.
So,
yeah, right.
So it may not be a big name. Like when they hire someone, like we're going to probably touch on it on a podcast, but like we may not have 20 minutes on hitting coach X because like it's like, all right, this guy did a good job with this. And that might be kind of all we could talk about. It's a very interesting situation.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I think the Braves are going to have a massive pool of coaches. I mean,
big time.
Without being a major league coach, are the pinnacle on the East Coast. The Dodgers are the pinnacle on the West Coast, just in terms of prestige and maybe where coaches want to be one day. But I mean, besides that, the Braves could very easily be third in that pecking order. You have Atlanta, you have the Cubs, you have the Red Sox, the Giants. It is a very, very good situation the Braves are in. It's going to be a desirable job, and we will see what kind of person they ultimately hire. We will have presumably the benefit, if they've been working as a hitting coach either presently or past, we should have some data to know how their teams performed in the past. But as we kind of said off the top, a hitting coach is not just going rogue and saying, well, Brad, this is what I think is best, so this is what I'm doing, and I'm not listening to anybody else. Obviously, it is a partnership with the front office, with the analytics team the Braves have in place. And I'm very, very interested and curious to see who they ultimately hire, and not just that one hitting coach position, but the assistant job. It's an important hire for the Braves, and with a little bit of luck, they will find their candidate and get things back on track, and hopefully with some health too next year.
Yeah, that's a good way to kind of leave it here, I think, as far as this reaction is concerned, because it's more unexpected because of what was said last week, even when our guard was up, and I made fun of it, but like sometimes GMs and coaches don't tell you the whole truth. That's kind of part of the job. I don't love that as a media member. It's just kind of my experience, and that kind of happened here. And maybe they changed their mind to that same point. Like, it wasn't like we don't know Alex came on that call and said, guys, we're about to fire him, and then didn't say it. We'll see. But yeah, a major change. like it's not as major as Brian Sticker getting fired or Alex Gonzalez getting fired, but certainly you send 3 coaches packing in mid-October on a team that underperformed this year. Like that's a message of some kind that's being sent from the top, and we'll see what they do, kind of respond to it. And by the way, as we get into kind of player deep dives throughout the winter, we'll hit on some stuff that, approach issues and what they maybe didn't maximize in certain players. Someone was talking about Jared Kelnick today. Like the data with Jared, it's a one-off, it's one player, but like him being actively worse here than he was previously is kind of scary in some respects. So we'll stop rambling now. But
and coming from a place in Seattle, which couldn't develop like Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth if they had him on the team, that's a good point. I mean, again, I think to put a bow on the conversation, no issue at all with moving on from Seitzer, especially Seitzer. I mean, he's obviously the focal point today.
He is the headliner by far, yes.
And look, he did a fantastic job overall. Especially going back to 2018, anywhere from above average to historically good offenses under his watch. And again, it's not all on a coach, but the Braves really were a good offensive team more times than not. We will never know how this season went if they had a healthy Acuna and if they didn't have injury after injury after injury. But as we've kind of said, sometimes you can't fire the players, but you can fire the other voice in the room, which is the coach. And now it's just kind of a waiting game to see who the Braves hire and what kind of changes are going to be made, whether it is an organizational change or if it's just more of a new voice in the room to try to get the most out of these guys.
Maybe if we were on First Take, we would have been charged with coming out guns blazing in one direction or the other on this. But I'm sure it's kind of funny, like when we reacted on Sunday, it was like, all right, we kind of understand bringing it back, lead on the record. I get all that. And we kind of have the same reaction today. Like that may not be the best podcast, but it is how I feel. And we're never going to lie to you on this podcast. We're going to give you what we actually think. And I would have understood it either way. I think we were among the first to be kind of in the media, quote unquote, around to be like, guys, Kevin Seitzer might not be safe at the end of the season. And it wasn't because we hate Kevin Seitzer. It was because like, if you see the results and just the way this stuff works, and I don't love defaulting to that, but when things don't go well, oftentimes that's what happens. Somebody loses their job. And unfortunately it was Kevin Seitzer and company today.
Yeah. But it's funny looking back on it because I remember it was the Baltimore Orioles series in June. And that was just, dude, it was like the worst of the offensive swoon. Like every night, it's like, what are these guys doing in the pregame? Like, is there any preparation? Is there any scouting report? Is there any game plan? And that was the first time I kind of wondered aloud because my Twitter mentions went nuts. If it might be time to at least think about a change of hitting coach for Kevin Seitzer. And of course, that was months ago. And it's not like I was saying that he was going to get fired, but I thought as the season progressed, it became more and more of a possibility. And obviously, after having a week to kind of reflect on the season as a whole, the Braves have decided to change course. And it was a big day. Maybe we weren't expecting it to be a big afternoon of Braves news. And then it broke and it was like, well, Brad, I think you texted me within about 30 seconds and said, we have some new podcast material tonight. And here we are.
Yeah, I think my message to our group chat of Hammer Territory was we're throwing out the rundown this evening, which we did promptly when this news broke. But all right, Scott, we'll sign off now. And record time for us, under a half hour. We did it, Scott. We set an alarm. We didn't go over it. Anything else to share or plug on the way out?
Not a ton to plug. A big thank you to everybody who is tuning in. As you know, as we have said a couple times, we are a 12-month-a-year pod, so we'll have plenty of stuff in the coming weeks, days, months. Whenever news breaks, we'll always have a show. We really pride ourselves on no matter what. We always do a show, even if there's like nothing to talk about. We do the famous Scott and Brad's like famous dinner recipes episode or favorite movies. Something. Yeah, that almost happened during the lockdown, the lockout a couple of years ago.
That's true.
Dark times in those streets. But no, we're here. Big day for the Braves. Both a day to move on from a coach who's done a lot of good things, but also kind of exciting to figure out who they're going to hire next. And we'll be back with another show here soon.
Absolutely. More to come. Please subscribe to the podcast. anywhere you find your podcast. If you're a YouTube watcher, that's great. Subscribe there, but also subscribe on the audio side and download on the audio side to help to support the podcast. It just takes a click or two. It should be pretty easy to go ahead and do that. Tell your friends. Follow us on social media. We're at Hammer Territory everywhere on social media. We'll have more pretty soon. I'm not exactly sure when the next podcast will be. It might be Sunday in our normal slot. We'll see. Stay tuned for that. If you subscribe, it'll be delivered to your podcast feed immediately when it is dropped. So go ahead and do that. We'll sign off now, and we'll see you all next time.